All right, well, we're gonna get started and carry on from last time I shared, which was last week. And one thing I just wanted to share was that, actually, Kevin, would you mind, I can do it, I'm right here. This is for you, notes for you and Pastor to follow along. Afterwards, Pastor Mary and I were talking, and she mentioned about when she had shared 2 weeks ago about Psalm 103, verse 2, I almost said point 2, about bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. And I listed those out: forgiveness, healing, redemption, loving kindness, tender mercies, satisfies us with good things so that our youth is renewed like the eagles. So that's like, this all-encompassing benefits. The most important, yeah. You on. Yes. Sorry. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for checking. I'm on. So what I just wanted to clarify, because Jennifer and I, so Pastor Mary said, had you listened to my message? And I didn't listen to the message, but I had been meditating because Pastor Mary let me know like a month in advance that I would be sharing last week. So I just started thinking about putting him first in that verse about put first in Matthew 6, put first my kingdom or his kingdom, his righteousness, and all these other things will be added unto you. So I saw that as, I was asking the Lord about kingdom and righteousness, and how do we seek both those things first, and he just showed me they're two sides of the same coin, and that it's benefits and abilities. So his benefits are in his kingdom, and we are able to access those because of Christ. Those benefits have always been there, but our ability to access that was based on our righteousness prior to Christ. So because of Jesus' work, his finished work, those benefits and our ability to access them are freely open to us. It's based on our ability to trust God and to believe him for it. So that's just sort of a recap. But I asked Jennifer, going back to what Pastor Mary had asked me about, I said, what did Pastor Mary share on last week? Because I had missed it. We were camping. I had missed the morning part, this equip class, but I was here for service because we were on a camping trip. And so she listed off a bunch of stuff, and then she mentioned benefits, and that just leapt out at me because I had that in my notes already, and I had Psalm 103, verse 2, but Jennifer hadn't mentioned, she taught out of Psalm 103, verse 2. She just mentioned a bunch of different points that Pastor Mary covered, and I was like, oh, that's good. We're kind of teaching the same vein. I didn't know it would be the same exact verse and the same idea of forget not all my benefits. And as a New Testament believer, the importance of that is just that, or not just that, but he is, there's a temptation to think that by seeking God for his benefits, that we're doing it out of the wrong reason, and, that you don't want to just have a relationship with God just to get his stuff. That is the wrong approach. You'll never receive from God that way. It just doesn't, his kingdom doesn't work that way. You can't sort of go and just say, I don't want a relationship with you, but I want a relationship with stuff. It just doesn't, it does not work that way. So we can't approach it that way, but he does say, look, you have this relationship with me. Look at all these things that I bought and paid for you to freely enjoy, and I had no sorrow with it, and it's just sitting here. This is the equipment you need to do the job that I've sent you to do. And if you go out there and pretend that you're going to do it by yourself without my benefits, you're going to fall flat on your face, and we're going to be talking a lot, but it's going to be a lot of whining and crying. It's not going to be a good relationship. You're never going to grow. So if we don't access his benefits, we're never going to grow in him, because we're constantly going to be leaning to the arm of the flesh. We're just going to be looking at what our resources are. We're going to have a very limited scope about what we can accomplish, because we're just constantly going to be looking to our own skills, what we've done in the past that has worked. We might look to our parents when we get really desperate. We might, look at whatever, read a book, listen to a podcast, and go, oh, that's the secret to my success. Is it going to be, I'm going to do what billionaire Joe did on the podcast. He said you have to grind. So I'm just going to work super hard. Whatever it is that the key is that you're going to hear. But so there you go. That wasn't even in my notes. But that was some review about finances. And really the main point for today and going into being an ambassador, I want to talk about ambassadors, that we are ambassadors in Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:20 says that we are now ambassadors of the message of reconciliation. So we have a message, but it starts with stewardship. So we're all sort of given that role. President Trump is naming people to his cabinet. And God, once we became believers, God named us to his cabinet. He said that we are ambassadors. He said, now because of this, you are ambassadors for Christ. So why start with financial stewardship? Because it's the least of these things. And if we don't show ourselves faithful in the least of these things, the Bible tells us that the true riches we won't have the true riches. We won't be able to access those things. And that's the very things that an ambassador needs to be able to demonstrate that I am indeed an ambassador of Christ. So it says that believers shall have signs and wonders following them, right? As ambassadors, we're equipped with those signs and wonders, the benefits. That's not for us to consume upon ourselves. Again, that is if we approach God with this consumption attitude and scrounging, just like Black Friday, it used to be people would trample each other to get Black Friday deals. That's the scrounging after stuff that we can all fall victim to in greater or lesser degree, right? We'd say, I would never do, I wouldn't go that far, and I wouldn't do stuff like that, but we can be tempted to be worried about our finances, right? And to think, how are we gonna make ends meet, or whatever it is. The Bible tells us in Hebrews 5, it says that, Hebrews 5, verse 13, anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. And I think, I've shared this many times, I think of finances as like a gym. It's our training ground. You have to train your body. And then when you need to be able to do things in your everyday life, reaching up and pulling down something heavy off a cupboard or picking up a box or whatever it is, if you haven't trained your body, you're going to have a hard time doing those simple tasks in life. Or, people use the analogy for why they want to get fit when they're older. I want to be able to play with my grandkids. I want to be able to sit down on the floor and stand up under my own power without turning around on the couch and getting on my elbows and, touching 5 different things to be able to stand up. So constant use, our finances, we have practice with that all the time. To be able to tithe regularly. Some people get paid twice a month, some people get paid once a month. But that's a continuous use, and that's going to train us to discern, because when we're engaging with our finances, that's our substance, that's what we need to survive. When we're training and listening to God about trusting Him for what we should give, right? So, brings me to the topic of budgets, right? Because a budget is something that directs, it's not a recording of how we've spent, but it directs our money, right? And budgets are important. The Bible tells us that in Proverbs 27:23, be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. So it tells us, there's many places Jesus talks about, you do well to tithe, but he talks about people tithing off their mint and dill, just being legalistic about it. And he says you do well to tithe, but you've forgotten, the real purpose of it. Budgets, again, you need to know what your expenses are. You need to direct and look at and say, hey, we're spending all this money on lattes or whatever it is. There's that book, The Latte Factor. And there's a woman trying to get ahead, and she's buying muffins and lattes every day, and then she does something at lunch, and at the end of the day, she's spent $25 a day on coffee and muffins, which aren't really, first of all, a lot of nutrition and anything else, but budgets are important because they can reveal holes in your sack, right? In your, what's that from Haggai, where you put money into a bag with holes in the bottom. It's just going, you think where did it all go? So you should be able to look and see, right? But budgets should not dictate our giving. So if we feel impressed to give, and we say, oh, I can't because of my budget, I have to stick to my budget. You might think, well, that's reasonable. Well, if you're impressed to give, and we should all be impressed to give at times, and if we're not, that's a really good place to step back and say, okay, I never feel compelled to give. I never have an impression that I should give or stretch a little. You're probably tuned out, or maybe you've had some hardness there where you've rejected that voice so often that there's sort of a sound barrier there. You can break that down very easily by just submitting and saying, and having the intention to give. That reopens that channel right away. So if your finances are dictating to you your giving, what the Bible tells us is that we cannot serve two masters. So you've just made yourself a slave to one, and that is money. So we're either going to serve God. We can't serve God and mammon, the Bible tells us. So is it good practice to have a budget and to know where our money is going and to pay attention to that and to follow the budget, commit to it? If we have a spouse, to bring them into the discussion, of course. Yes. But should those things stop us? You say, well, I wish I could give, but my budget, I've got to get that birthday present coming up for someone, and I've got to do this. If you look at your needs, you say, you can have that conversation with the Lord too and say, we've got a couple things coming up that our money is going toward, so I'm believing you to help me with this. I'm believing you to show me where that's going to come from, because we're committed to certain things, Lord. But I'm going to put you first. And that's where I think the magic, but that's where faith kicks in. So if you're not using your faith in finances, it's going to be hard to use your faith for the true riches. One of the things Andrew Womack talks a lot about with true riches, he thinks healing is one of the true riches. Because without healing, you can't pay for. There's certain things that are incurable, naturally speaking, right? There are incurable diseases, incurable sicknesses or injuries, or there's only one way to be healed of some of those things, and that's miraculous healing. And if you aren't willing to trust God with your money, you're not going to be willing to trust God with your healing. Now, I know there's cases where people, you don't have to look back too. So if you're in a position where you haven't been faithful with your finances, and I'm sure nobody in here is in that, but if you felt like maybe you haven't done enough, or maybe I haven't been as good as I could have been, that's not how we approach God either. We don't approach God and say, well, look, God, I tithe, so I need my healing now. I'm going to redeem my tithing coupon for a healing coupon. It doesn't work. We're not trading and bartering with the Lord. We're just trusting. We're learning to trust Him for our very basic necessities. And if we're not trusting Him in that which is least, are we going to trust Him for unity in our marriage? Are we going to trust Him for a child that we think is maybe going the wrong way? How are we going to trust Him to help us with that? If we're not willing to trust Him with that which is least, we're not going to trust Him with something that's more important. When we had young children, our children here now are older, but when we don't need babysitters, but when we had younger kids, we wanted babysitters. And we thought, who would we trust our kids with? Who is a responsible, neighborhood girl or that's recommended by someone else? And then there's people that I thought, I wouldn't have that person in my house to watch my kids. You're not going to trust, but would I maybe give that person, if they came to my door and they needed money or something, I might consider giving them some money. I wouldn't give them something that was more important to have stewardship over for even a few hours. So there's people in my family I wouldn't trust to take care of a baby. Can you think of someone in your family you might go, I wouldn't have them babysit my baby. I'm not trying to be mean, but there's a number of people that fall on that list, just with competence, and then there may be some of their character issues. But so we got to use budgets in the proper perspective. Don't let that stop you. In fact, that's something that in our lives has compelled us past into financial breakthrough, is our giving. And we learned back when I was transitioning into real estate, and Jennifer was more full-time in real estate. I had actually started, and then Jennifer joined me, and then I was just too busy with schoolwork and being a teacher. So But we just decided that since Jennifer's income was part-time, we were going to give 20% off that. And it was not an easy time. There were expenses that came up because Jennifer quit working, and it wasn't as regular income. But we just felt, okay, we're facing something that naturally there's some fear. Naturally there's some risk. So how do we equip ourselves to face that? And giving has always been the weapon that just, I just feel peace when I'm giving, when I know that I'm trusting God. And so we continue to do that. And sometimes we went into a little bit of debt and accrued some things. And maybe that was because our budget wasn't tight enough too. So it's not like you can blame giving, that, I went into debt because of giving. But it compelled us to look at those things. So when you make a decision to tithe, you're going to tighten up. It's going to cause you to have a better, tighter budget. It's going to cause you to look at those areas. When you prioritize giving, and Andrew Womack shares about when he started first to say, we're going to give, and even if it's to our own hurt. And he talks about people coming to him and say, yeah, but I got these expenses. I don't have enough money coming in. And he said, well, if you can't pay all those expenses anyway, pay God, not pay God, but honor God first, and then go to your landlord and say, you know what, this is the best I can do. We're trying to work it out. Is there something I can, maybe they'll have you can paint some apartments when someone, leave. You just don't know how God's going to open things up to you. He always will. He always has for us. And I asked Jennifer if I could share this, just because this is more recent for us, but, and she gave me the green light, but just personal experience recently, we've had, this year wasn't a great year for us in sales. It was down about 30% from last year. But we had committed to some things this year that cost us more. So, those two things don't go well together in business, right? They're not a lot of fun. And so at a time when usually we get a little bump in the fall from activity, it was low activity across, like everybody in our office was talking about it, but just sharing. They weren't, talking down at the mouth or, oh, woe is me, but just sharing like, yeah, business has been slow, And we went a couple months where we didn't get a paycheck. We've gone a couple months without a paycheck. And we had listings that were sitting there. And the only one that was selling was a really cheap one. It was the cheapest one and the most work of all of them. But it was a blessing to be able to help these people. But so we didn't have a lot in the pipeline, not a lot coming up. And so when you have that happen, when things are going well, prosperity sometimes can be the biggest trap for people, because when things are going well, they go, you know what, thanks Lord, I'll see you next time I'm in trouble. And I don't need to go into why that's a bad idea, right? Just even if nothing changes financially, think of, you're not in tune with, you're an ambassador. You've now just said, you know what, I don't need your protection. And so you're sowing, essentially, by not walking with God, you're sowing towards a future that you haven't been, praying and seeking Him to pray out things over your family. You haven't been sowing seed into other people. So you haven't been laying up for yourselves treasures in heaven. So you haven't been implanting in other people, because you're not thinking about Him, and you're not going to Him daily as your source. You're thinking of yourself really in that situation. God is going to teach you to think of others and if you're walking and talking with Him, He's going to say, see that guy over there, he needs help. Just go and say hi to him. Just go up, talk to him. Or, He'll bring people to your remembrance. He'll bring people to your remembrance. So you might have somebody in your heart just go, oh, I just thought of that person, they randomly came to mind. That's not randomly, probably. Numerous times, like there was a guy who came to church, the men's meeting recently, and I just kept thinking about him. His name's Calvin, this guy that came with Michael Dietrich. Michael, hand talker, our friend. He came with Michael, and I've been trying to get coffee with him or whatever. Anyways, he just came to mind, and I was just thinking about him, like I should reach out to him and invite him to church again. And then later that morning, I think it was on a Sunday, he reached out to me and said, hey, when's the next men's meeting? So, I wish I would have beat him to the punch, right? Because then he would have said, I was just thinking about this so well. He texted me. I didn't follow up on that, but, anyway. So we got to listen to those things too, right? But But if we're not following God in our finances, and because we're in a zone of, we're kind of in a mode of prosperous. We feel prosperity has fallen on us, and we're good. We're good now. I'll come back to you when I need you, Lord. Just stay over there. I don't. So, but the real, what are we at? 9:22. The real thing I wanted to get to here. So what we decided to do, though, in that situation, to finish up that story, is I just was having a hard time. I was struggling a bit. I actually applied to do some part-time work because we just didn't have, we hadn't been paid for months, and it didn't look like we were going to get paid for a few months. And I was like, look, I need to do something. I need to put some money in I need to have something coming in, Lord. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I applied online at a couple places, and I mean, at Amazon. I was just like, I know there's jobs there, and it's $20+ an hour. I was like, hey, it's something. I knew as a distraction from doing our things that we should be doing to get business going and sowing, but at the same time, I was just having that conversation. I did it, and as we were doing that, so sometimes it's just stepping out and doing what you've been impressed to do, and then God opens up something else to you. So as soon as I did that, I slept on it. I woke up, and I just knew. At the same time we did that, I said, you know what? We're going to give. So I'm stepping out and doing this thing that's really a change from where I feel like we should go, but I don't see how else we're going to, have money coming in right now besides getting something that's going to put a paycheck going. And then once we're good, we have some business going, we'll go back, I'll quit. And at the same time, we're going to commit to give. We're going to seek God, where should we give? What should we do? On top of our tithing. We don't consider, I don't personally think of tithing as giving. I mean, I just think of it as it's just like, I don't think of paying my mortgage as giving. I don't think of I think of it as a responsibility, and some people I think that's a negative way to think of it. It's not to me. It's just, it's set aside. It's already spoken for. That money is already spoken for. It's not mine to decide to do with. It's just, that's the church's money. That's the church's money. And so we trust our pastors and their hearts to give and to be responsible and good stewards and budget and do all that stuff. We just know. So, but we wanted to give. So we decided to just, think about it, pray about it. And, in our early days of giving as a couple, we used to, one of us would have, usually it was me, because Jennifer does the finances. So usually it would be me that would come and say, I feel like we're supposed to give, because I was like, and she'd be like, okay, what are you thinking, And it was usually at a time when it wasn't convenient to give. We didn't have a surplus. We hadn't just gotten paid a bunch or come into some money or something. And, and now we've learned how to navigate that by what? By use, by practice, like we read earlier from Hebrews 5. By constant use, having your senses trained. And so now it's both of us that'll do that. John will say, I feel like we're supposed to give here. And I'll say, what are you thinking? What's the higher number? Because usually you have two numbers. You go, 500 or 250. Yeah, let's go with the higher one. Whatever it is. I'm just using that as an example. But, so that as soon as we did that, we had, I don't know if it was within 48 hours, we had one of our biggest buyers, meaning they're buying the most expensive house, who've been dormant and looking for probably 6 months, longer. Yeah. It's been a long time they've been looking. Every 6 weeks, there's a new house that popped up that could fit, and they just always found something wrong with it. And then they sent us a listing. I don't know if it was the next day. I should write these things down, but it was really close to when we decided, before we even gave, we decided to. But you know what? We trust our decisions. That's as good. Our word is as good as doing it on giving. We don't go, I decided to, and then now that things are better, maybe we don't need to. Maybe the Lord's trying to tell us that we don't need to. No, we just know that was just a decision. It wasn't an option. We were going to do that. And then you have to make sure you follow through. Like Paul said in his letter, I don't know which verse that is, but I think it's in 2 Corinthians, where he talks about, you purposed to give. Now I'm sending to you, I think he sent Timothy to make sure, to remind you, don't forget. Don't forget what you decided, what put you on a better path. Don't forget what you had consecrated. Because if you don't give that, eventually that you're going to that's gonna come up as condemnation for yourself. You're gonna withdraw. And as soon as you did that, they sent us a listing, and now they're
Split pace. 43 minutes.
Sorry.
16 seconds per mile.
Okay, it's a long mile. I'm walking around here. I guess it's recording. So they put an offer in on a house, and that's closing in January. We had another buyer that came forward. They've been dormant. We just got a deal for them. We had 2 listings sell after that. Well, I think one of them was already in. So we had two listings, and then a third one that's been sitting for months, and it's a nice listing. That one we had a deal on. But what happened was, for me, right away, nothing changed in terms of our finances, but I had peace just drop. People talk about the peace. That was the victory for me. I just knew. I knew, because we were sowing into our future. We hired an assistant this year. We've stepped up our marketing. And the first thing you want to do is, you go, well, we're spending money on marketing. If you cut off your marketing as a business owner, if you cut that off, you're strangling your business. It's just, you might as well just figure out an exit path. You're strangling business. That should be the last thing you touch is marketing. Now, you might sharpen some of your marketing up and say, well, this we don't need, but we're gonna reinvest in this. This is a good time. And that's a principle too of the kingdom and of people who are good investors. When the markets are down, that's a great time to buy. That's a great time to invest. In a spiritual sense, it's because you're doing it by faith. You're not doing it because naturally it seems like you shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be sowing more. We shouldn't be giving more. We have less to give. What are you thinking? If you talk to an accountant, they say, you have less to give. You don't have extra to give right now. Why are you giving? Because that's the very time when that means even more. Think of the people who are exalted for their giving. It's people that gave out of very little, right? Was it the widow's mite? And Jesus said, look what she put it. That's all she had. It was just a little bit, but that's everything. So it's a lot easier to give everything when you don't have as much. I mean, in some ways, because when you have a lot, people think it's going to be easier to give. If you haven't given when you have little, it's going to be harder to give when you have a lot, because guess what? You're going to value it more, because you haven't learned when you had a little bit. You haven't learned to honor God above your money. You haven't put Him first over your money. And then when you get a lot, you're going to go, look at this. This is especially because everybody's they value me more now because of my stuff. They value me because of my house, because of my net worth. This is what I'm drawing value from, is all this stuff I've gathered, all this success I've had. This is my value. So now your personal values and worth is tied up in the stuff. So it is a great time to be, when you're like, well, I don't have that much. Perfect time to start giving a lot. Amen. Give and stretch. It's a perfect time. Then when you do have, it's not going to, because guess what? Even those people who have a lot, when they have something bad happen to them in their finances, which happens to a lot of them, a lot of people that are really wealthy, they've had stories where they go way down. They lose it all. Many of those people, they've lost it all a couple times, some of them. But they know how to get it back. But if your identity is tied up in it, not only do you lose it all and you have challenges financially, you're going to have challenges with your identity. Who am I? Am I a big shot guy that has a country club membership and drives a really nice? That's who I am. And now I'm not that guy anymore. Who am I? All my friends are friends with me based off of that. So their whole world comes crumbling down. I haven't even gotten to my title. Ambassadors, authority, and anointing. So anyways, I think we should probably stop there. But we are anointed to be ambassadors, so empowered. But it starts with practice in our finances. So amen.